and the solution we design is based on producer producing a message where the services or a event broker carries the message from one service to other several microservices. So using event-driven architecture, we can have a solution with decoupled systems. So if case there is any update in one microservice, it doesn't affect the other one. And also it's like a producer does not have to know where his message is flowing, or he does not have to wait for the response. So that's about event-driven architecture. Again, it's easy to scale. All you have to do is to bring in a new microservice or a system. You just have to subscribe to a message produced by an event broker, and that's all. And it can take its own service as well. So coming back to Async API. So if you see why we need Async API, we all know REST API is easy to design and document because we have several tools, including we have RAML, which we can give it to a service who is consuming our API. So who knows what is the endpoint, what are the resources, what's the schema of the request, and what is the response and everything. But when it comes to Async API or event-driven architectured solutions, we did not have any up till Async API. So the main goal of Async API is to create the specification that supports event-driven architecture, so that documents an event-driven architectured solution. So using Async API, we can design and document the event-driven architectured solutions. So this Async API was started by Apache, that's owned by Linux, and it's again open source. Now MuleSoft has also picked up, and it's trying to provide for our solutions which we built through MuleSoft. Yeah, so MuleSoft supports once the Async API is built, like we build a RAML in Design Center and it's published to Exchange, we can use Anypoint Code Builder or Anypoint Studio to scaffold it and build the solution, build the application. So what does Async API specification include? It includes the information and ID and server brokers. So in info, you'll basically have what the API is and what are the contact details of the person who's developing, and as well as a description of the API. And coming to servers, this is where we specify what are the messaging servers we are using, queues, what are the protocols, then different environments. And then comes our main part, which is the body, where we specify what are the channels or what are the queues we will be using. So that can be you're publishing an order and then consuming an order. So you'll have two different queues under orders channel. So that's what we define here. And what you see in the left side or right side, schemas, messages, correlation IDs, so these all can be put into a component. So if you see in our RAML, we have a feature called fragment. So we can just publish a fragment and reuse it multiple times in different RAML or specification. But in Async API, it's something within an API. So you define something called components. We'll see that further in the demo. But you define something called components under that schema or messages, which are reusable under different channels and queues. The same way, we can also define messages. And so what is the main need of defining a message or a header and payload? So when at present, if you don't develop a code without an API specification, you have to do a if you have to do a validation for the body you're passing through the queue, you have to do it manually. You have to put a schema and then validate if the incoming data is valid or not. But if you use an Async API specification, it itself does that process. Just like we have our API kit, which validates the input incoming request and throws back 400 BAT request. The same way, if we define any schema or example under messages, So it would first validate it and then allow it if the uh, data validates through the schema. And then we have tags. It's a tag again, just define the name and example. Yeah. So let's consider a small use case before we jump into a demo. Here, what I'm trying to do is we have a stock order purchase. So if I have to buy a stock, if you would have seen in any other stock buying platform or a broker application, you go and place an order. It takes at least or 2 or 3 days to get assigned. There are several backend processes, but then it's an asynchronous process. So I've picked up that use case. So what happens? A broker application, uh, a client goes and user goes and places an order to buy a stock. So first we put it. So Mule application listens to it, and then it is putting it into MQ, messaging queue. The message is in the queue now, and then Mule application, who is consuming to the queue, picks it up and checks. Then we have the process to check if the stock is available or not. If it's not there, it goes and sends out error notification saying stock unavailable to purchase. Or if yes, then it goes and put it into another queue where the actual purchase of the queue is happening. Sorry, actual purchase of the stock is happening. And then again, there is another flow which is consuming the message of the anypoint MQ, where the actual process of buying the stock happens. Basically, in our terms, we store it in the database or any other CRM, and then notify the user that the stock has been purchased successfully. Yeah, let me just reshare my screen. Yeah. So to build an async API, it's a normal process how we build a REST API RAML. So we go to Design Center. In Design Center, I already have one, but let's start creating a new one for, let me just open this. So if you click on create, you have three options. Again, specification and fragment belongs to each other for a REST API. Then we have new async API. So Async API was launched in 2021 October. Yeah, so this is our basic layout. Once we start, we have Async API and then info, the title and version. Channels is where we define all our queue names and then services. What we can, let's start by just adding few servers. So servers is mainly where we define what are the queues we are using in our architecture or solution. So let me just, I'll be using RabbitMQ for an example. And then once it's defined, you can define the protocol or the security and everything. So I'll define the protocol. So as you can see, MuleSoft Async API defines most of the protocols here. But there's one thing to keep in note, that even though all the protocols are here, the Anypoint Studio or code builder only allows four protocols. That is Anypoint MQ, RabbitMQ, and then Salesforce platform events, and then Solace PubSub. So other than these four at present, the MuleSoft Studio and Code Builder is not supported. So let me just define this as AMQP, but this is just for the documentation. Again, if we import it in our RAML, scaffold it in our application, it would return an error saying it contains a protocol that does not support by Studio. The same way you can have the URL. So URL is like the URL of the MQ or a host in our terms. Uh, it can be something like something like this. Again, you can define this for each environment as well, like RabbitMQ, UAT, production, and development. And if you have any security, you can define the security as well, like what is the security we're providing here. So let's come to that in components. And in channels, we again go and define what are the channels or queue names and components here. So let me go to the one I've already defined. So the same use case as we saw, that's what I've defined here as well. So if you see, it's just a stock async API to place stock purchase order asynchronously. And the service I have here is, I'm using an example of Anypoint MQ because that's something supported, so we can scaffold it in our application. And if you see, I have protocol Anypoint MQ as well. And then I've defined it for 3 environments for development, UAT, and for production. And this is a dummy URL, but then it's a this comes into picture. And we have a key called user authentication. Let me show in the later where I've defined this. So I have channels. So I had 2 channels here, if you remember. So one channel is here to get the order transactions and then to purchase an actual stock. So similar way, I have one first channel that is stock order request. Once order request is placed, so first I have a queue name called order transactions. So for each queue, you can define which server is being used. So for example, you can have multiple other queues as well here, or a messaging broker defined. And for each channel, you can define its own messaging queue. So for example, now for stock order request, I have all 3 for each environment. So I've defined here. The same way I'm doing publish. So it's kind of like a resource. Under that, we have all curl, curd operations like post and get. So similar way, we are publishing the stock order details, and this is the message. So message is like, this is the schema I mentioned. Again, if we pass a number instead of a string, it would throw a 400 bad request here. And similar way, I'm again subscribing to it as well. So I have a subscriber operation as well defined here with the same body. Then I have a second channel, which is to purchase a stock request. And then the queue name is called place order, and which again uses Anypoint MQ, UAT, and tab. And so here, if you see, I have not defined the message exactly like how we have defined here. So this is where components comes to picture. If you see in the components, I can define something which is reusable. So my Anypoint MQ has a user authentication, that's like user password. But we know MQ has a client ID and client secret authentication. But for an example, I have provided here username and password authentication. So this is something you can define and then reuse it here. So you see user authentication that's being defined in the bottom here under the components, and as well as messages. So I can have multiple messages for different queues, which can be reused again and again. So I have something called user stock details, where I have a user ID, name, and the stock name and the quantity. So once it's defined here, I just have to refer it here. So I have to use components message, user stock details, and it will be referred. So the similar way, we also have async API specification builder provided by Apache organization. So in the right side, you can see the documentation, what are the servers, and then what are the channels, and then their operations here. So we can also view this in Async API Studio. So let me just paste here. So the latest version of Async API is 3.0, but then MuleSoft is still at 2.6. They're still building it. So this was latest. Yeah. So you can see the same documentation here as well, where it shows each and every environment and then what is the security for it, and as well as operations to receive, and then what it accepts, the payload, and example of the payload, what we defined. So this is also another platform to build. We have for RAML, Swagger. We can use Swagger to build a documentation for REST API. Similar way, we can use Async API Studio to build a document async API and then use it in our RAML as well, in our design center as well. So once we have done with the specification, we just have to go and hit the publish button, which will publish to our exchange. I've already published it, so let me just go to exchange and view it there. So as you can see, again, it's the same documentation. We can provide this to other microservices who are listening to it. They will know what are the body they are receiving, and then they can work with it. Or if someone is publishing, what are the security they have to follow for each environment as such. So this provides a documentation. Now let's the studio. Yeah, and yeah, let's come to code builder. Again, I've scaffolded the project which I have published to exchange here. So as you can see, I already can see the message listener. So this symbol is Async API component. As soon as I click, I don't have to specify anything. You can see the servers are already been mentioned, whatever I have defined in my specification. I can add or remove other servers as well. And in the left side, I have global config. So in the global config, you can see here, it has already added a few host and then client ID, client secret, what all details required for any endpoint MQ connection. And these will be already externalized for us in devproperties.com. So if you see here, uh, yeah, in dot properties file. So if you see, you just have to provide client secret and client ID for each environment, and the rest of the task is taken care by Async API itself already. Yeah, so this is a platform again to build Async API into application. The second one would be in Anypoint Studio. Let me just reshare my screen. Is my screen visible or is it small?
It is small in the corner. Thing. We need to.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, is it visible now?
Yeah,
Yep.
better.
Ah,
Yeah.
yes, sir.
Okay. So let me just create a new project and call it demo async API. So let me just add the API we have published in Exchange. So it scaffolds like the regular RAML we have. Yeah, so it successfully scaffolded. Uh, Now you can see the listeners here going to consume. So if I click on this, you can already see what servers we have as an option here, Anypoint MQ, UAT, and Dev, as well as disable content validation. So they are providing an option for us to, if we need to validate it or not. So if I set it to false, so it will validate it, and it would throw an error if the, again, the data does not is not valid. And the similar way we have publish as well, to publish a message into other queue. Again, here we can specify which channel and then server name. Again, we have a disable content validation for this. So now let's see global which it generated by default. So if you see, since we have three servers, it has created three configuration for each server. And since we defined it as Anypoint MQ, it has created a configuration by default for Anypoint MQ. And if you see inside as well, the client ID, client secret is already externalized for us. And the URL, if you notice, this is what we had provided in our specification. So the URL we provide there will be imported here. And it also added the global property. And this is async API, just like our API Kit router configuration, API Kit for async API configuration. And like we saw in Anypoint Code Builder, the dev properties are also generated under SRC main resources here. So we just have to provide the ID and secret, and it's already referred there. So I have a small use case which I have built. It's not a running use case because Anypoint MQ comes with subscription. Uh, this is a mock use case how we can use async API and build a solution. So if you see, as soon as a request comes in, I have a listener which is listening to it, and then it pushes into the queue. So I'm publishing all the message into a publish order queue. So I have a channel which we defined there as stock order request, and then a server name called order transactions. So I'm pushing it into that queue. So once it's pushed, we are consuming it here again. So this will be listening for any message which is put into message order or stock order request queue. And once it's picked, I have a logic here written to check if the stock is available from the database. And if it's not available, then we just go and put out an error notification. And if it's there, then we proceed and publish again the message to another queue, that is to place an order. The channel name is purchase stock order request. So again, we have another listener which is listening to that queue and which actually does the process. So here, if you see, we have decoupled the both the processes, all three processes. So once the message is put into the queue, listener will just return back with acknowledgement payload saying the order is still processing, order is under process, and then we again check if the stock is available as a separate microservice. So similar way we also have the other microservice to place an order. So here you can define in case of failure how you need to proceed with. You can configure again in Anypoint MQ with all the circuit breaker. You can go and add a circuit breaker, and also you can define DL queues as well in Async API as a server again, and then in your logic we can provide the DLQs in case of failure or multiple attempts. Yeah. So this is about Async API and how we can utilize it to build a event-driven architecture solution. So any questions? Let's see. Yeah, we cannot edit in itself image. I think that option is there if we create a project. So you can only have import RAML and then download RAML from Design Center, but not Async API for the moment. Yeah. Any questions, team?
Harsha, there is another question on the comments box. So someone is asking Subramanian.
Okay. Do we also have Async API Kit error handler like Mule API Kit error handler that is auto generated? No. Again, error is usually handled in async or event-driven architecture by defining DLQs or circuit breaker, right? So I don't have any error handler by default generated. So that's again left to us for designing and mentioning the logic here. Yeah. Let me just reshare my screen.
Manually and edit in Studio itself.
Sorry.
Vignesh has a question. Can we only import by publishing Async API spec in Exchange, or we can download and import manually and edit in Studio itself?
Yeah. To answer that question, again, we can only import it from Exchange. At present, the Studio does not have option to import Async API. It provides option to download or import a RAML.
Okay. Vignesh, are you clear? Any doubts?
Good, Nidhi. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Ali asked a question. Are we using AnyPoint MQ or RabbitMQ as in PPT showing RabbitMQ and in demo showing AnyPoint MQ? No, it depends on what we specify in Async API specification. So let me just reshare my screen and go back to specification. So the RabbitMQ I mentioned was for a demo. That's different, but the specification that is scaffolded is order async. So if you see here, I have any point MQ as a protocol which is defined for UAT, dev, and production. So when we scaffold it based on the protocol, it's defining the configurations. So yeah, we defined any point MQ. But yes, we can also define RabbitMQ and scaffold it. It would generate a configuration for RabbitMQ. What are the
Any
errors?
other-
Yeah.
Should I read? What are the
Vignesh,
error codes that will be sent to server through Async API Kit router?
since it's a asynchronous process, I think we would not be returning anything back to the server. Uh, so the server code usually is 400 again, like the standard request. It's not returned back to anyone because it's all decoupled, right? So we would have to log it somewhere. Yeah.
Any other questions? Anyone? You can unmute
Uh,
and ask. Yeah. Yeah, Hari.
Harsha, can you execute this flow and can you show us one request? How is processing the request by using any point MQ AsyncAPI API?
Yeah, so for that, we actually need a Anypoint MQ subscription, which was not available. So I couldn't actually run the application.
Okay, okay. Not might be this case, but if we have some existing another case, at least we can show how is the processing happening.
But yeah,
I believe like any sort of queuing thing can do it, right? So not only ActiveMQ, not only RabbitMQ. If you go with any sort of queuing mechanism who supports, I believe whatever he's trying to do it is possible. So correct me if I'm wrong, Arsha.
yeah, Prem, what you say is right. But at present, if you see the protocols supported by Anypoint Studio are only four. Even though we get the suggestion for any AMQ, AMQPs,
Mm-hmm.
if you see, we have multiple protocols which they provide. But not all protocols are supported by Studio.
Correct.
Okay, okay. Yeah, thank you, Prem and Harsha.
Yeah.
Yeah, Harsha, there is another one question. Do we also have DLQ to be added in Async API specification like normal channels?
Right, that's right. So we have to add a DLQ as a separate channel here, and it will create a queue in Async API again in the when we scaffold it, so we can handle the errors there.
Okay. Karthik, clear?
Yeah,
Any other questions? You can unmute and speak.
Sir. It's clear now. Thank you, sir.
yeah,
Okay.
One more thing he asked also, acknowledgement timeout. See, we have acknowledgement
Yeah,
timeout, right? Typically, processing time is taking more than 3 minutes or 4 minutes. Defaultly timeout in 2 minutes. So how we can do that?
yeah. That's again in the configuration.
Any other questions? Yeah, Harry, thank you. We can drop off.
Thanks, Hari.
Uh,
So for I mean to answer Karthik's question for acknowledgement timeout and async, we will also have MQ. Let me just share back the studio. Like regular queues, we'll again have Anypoint MQ connector as well. So we can just use ACK, NAC, and public subscriber here. And yeah, so you can provide the acknowledgement and no acknowledgement from here.
Can you click message listener? Just want to see in that acknowledgement mode is there. No, in the
Uh,
message.
it's not there.
Okay.
I think that ACK timeout should be provided here in the queue.
So if we use async API spec, it will be like auto acknowledgement.
Yeah, I think that can also be defined in the async API specification. It's not auto acknowledgement. Again, we can specify here.
Oh, nice.
yeah, there is one more question. Can we also configure delivery delay in Async API specification there?
Yes, we can specify that as well here. It's not generating. But yeah, to answer the question, we can define here delivery delay.
Okay. Bharat, anything else? Any more doubts? Anyone has any more doubts? I think no. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Harsha, for the informative session. The session was very nice. So thank you for all the participants. Yeah. So we can wind up then.
Yeah, thank
Yogesh and Yogesh, Vignesh, can you stay?
Surely, Nikhil.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you all. Bye.
thank you.
Do you want me to stay or else leave?
Any time frame. Any time.
Oh, Lord.
Frame start.
Now I can start, but no.
I think we can stop recording.
Anyway.